Good evening and welcome to a very special episode of Heart and Mind. I'm Dr. Dina McMillan and I'm glad you're joining me today. This is a very different topic than I was expecting to do at this time of year. I had lots of happy festive episodes to prepare for this wonderful season, and yet here we are. So, today we're talking about responding to collective trauma after mass violence, how to respond, and how to heal. I hope you'll stay with me on this very special episode. Now, I have promised you, and I think I keep my word, no more boring Tuesdays. I offer a very different show than most people. We don't just discuss political situations. Some people have fascinating shows that I watch as well because they have the political backstory. They know the underpinnings, the backroom deals. It's fascinating. But what is fascinating, I think, as well, is how all of us are being maneuvered, persuaded, influenced, manipulated by a system that most of us are not aware even exists. So I hope you will join me and have other people join me. It saves a lot of explanations live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time every Tuesday night. Now, if you aren't able to make it, or if an episode is especially of interest to you, or you want to show someone else, you can also look at the recorded version. I upload these episodes on my X feed at Dr. Dina1 on X. But you can also go on Daily Clout, Rumble, or YouTube and find all of the episodes of this important show. And I believe it's important because, unlike other people, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a journalist, I'm not an expert in security. I'm a social psychologist. And we study how the brain works. We study how people learn, how we're influenced and persuaded, manipulated and coerced, indoctrinated and brainwashed. And we don't just study it. We actually do experiments where we will actually do things and see if we can influence people's beliefs and behaviors without their awareness that they've even been messed with, that they've even been touched and tampered with, that their mindset has been tampered with. It's quite scary how well it works, and we're all vulnerable. So if you watch this show before, you know I constantly tell you, you have to be very careful, and so do I. Because we study the brain, one of the things about the brain is that the intellectual part of the brain is not the part of the brain that can be easily influenced. So all the knowledge in the world won't help you if you keep exposing yourself to this powerful information. But we'll talk about that more as we go. Now, speaking of powerful information that you really need to have, we all went through a massive psychological mass formation experiment during the COVID years. We were convinced that the flu was this new and fatal, horrible disease, that these untested, untried vaccines and hospital protocols were the answer, and it resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths. Well, guess what? Pfizer, one of the makers of the most popular COVID vaccine, went to court and tried to keep the results of the study of their vaccine quiet for 75 years. They were not successful. So Dr. Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, and a whole team of people went through the paperwork, looked at the studies, found the information, put it together, and made it easy for you to understand so you can see what they were up to, how we were all bamboozled, how dangerous this is, And as of the time I'm doing this recording, nobody from this era has gone to jail for what they did, which means the probability of something similar happening again is pretty high. You need to know how to protect yourself and your loved ones. Get your own copy of the Pfizer papers. You can easily get your copy on Amazon. And by getting your copy, you also support Daily Cloud's historic work, keeping us all informed and keeping us safe. Speaking of safety, I'm not feeling very safe now. So today's topic, I have on my serious clothes today. Usually I wear a more bright, festive color. These are my semi-morning clothes. I had a tough weekend. After waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and doing something terrible, naughty Dina, shouldn't have done it, looked at my phone and saw what happened on Bondi Beach in Sydney. So we've had a tough month with regard to terrorist attacks, all of us. How do we respond to that kind of collective trauma after mass violence? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I want to mention this because if you know me at all, if you've looked at me up at all, it may say that I'm in Australia. I lived in Australia for a long time, including 6 years in the area where the terrorist attacks occurred this weekend. And I love Australia. It's a wonderful country. However, over the last several years, they've had a government that seems hell-bent on destroying the culture and making the people unsafe, both financially and physically, opening the doors to just unbelievable levels of immigration from hostile cultures, not putting anything in place to keep people safe, allowing lots, and we've all seen all of those protests from the so-called pro-Palestinian groups, people who couldn't before even point out Palestine on a map, have decided it's their latest cause. But mixed in with that are genuine jihadists who are talking about the destruction of Israel. So over the past several years, we've seen in Australia a huge amount of attacks on Jewish people. Now, please know the Jews are the canaries in the coal mine for the rest of us. First, this group attacks the Jews and then they go after the Christians. And in fact, while we've had multiple attacks on Jewish people, if you look at the news from Europe, where I've also lived, you see that there have been attacks on Christmas, on the Christmas markets, attacks on people, protests that are trying to disrupt people, Muslims setting Christmas trees on fire. It is a very dangerous time right now, and a lot of us are frightened. So I want you to pay attention to this show because I never talk about a problem without also offering some solutions. So I want you to stay with me on this. So, are you ready for this discussion? Are you ready to go forward? I hope so. Every major financial collapse has been preceded by the same 7 warning signs. Before the Great Depression, before the 1970s stagflation, before the crash of 2008. Now all 7 are flashing red again for the first time in 15 years. American Alternative Assets just released a free report called the Bellwether Signal. It breaks down each of these signals and shows how to protect your retirement before the next wave hits. In times of uncertainty, gold has always been the ultimate safe haven. It held strong in 2008. It surged during the inflation crisis of the 1970s. And it remains one of the few assets not tied to political manipulation or a central bank policy. Find out why central banks are buying it in record amounts. And now you can too. Call 855-803-GOLD or visit cloutgold.com to get your free copy of the Bellwether Signal. That's 855-803-GOLD or go to cloutgold.com. Learn the signs, protect your savings, make your move while you still can. So if you're just joining us, I see some people are just joining us. We are talking about mass collective trauma due to violent events. Now, this is a picture from the Bondi Pavilion. It's near Bondi Beach, where people of all faiths and no faith at all have come and laid flowers out of respect for the people. 15 people killed, 42 injured and hospitalized. That, in a place like Australia, one of the things about living in Australia, you just get used to lower crime. There's just lower crime. You know, when I was living in Brisbane, right before I came back to the States, I lived above some really popular restaurants. Now, it was a building that was one of those old wool store buildings, so really thick walls, so you couldn't smell anything from the restaurants, couldn't hear anything. But I never saw a fight. I never saw an argument. People went there to have a nice meal and to enjoy themselves. That's the Australian way of life. That's how Australians do things. So I'm not saying anyone could be prepared for what happened in Bondi. But for this to happen in Australia is shocking. Now, in one way, it's not shocking. By allowing all of those supposed pro-Palestinian protests to just overtake public spaces, unfettered, uncontrolled, with the police being so strict about other groups taking up public spaces, but these people being allowed to do and say whatever they want. They opened the door for people to say, hey, let's take it further. They're not going to stop us. And that's exactly what happens. When you have these pro-Palestinian protests and anybody walks by that looks Jewish and they get yelled at, spat upon, attacked, and the police don't do anything. That's giving a signal to people that you can go further. It's not, we don't even have to hearken back to the Third Reich. It's just human nature. If you allow people to be bullied like that, then people who have a worse agenda feel free to go further and they attack them. Now, but it hasn't just been in Sydney. We know that. If you're in America, it wasn't just Sydney. We had National Guards shot point blank just a few weeks ago. One died, one is recovering. Brown University just a few days ago, 2 dead, 9 others injured. All of us are feeling it. I don't know about you. I know that when I saw this, some people were like, oh my goodness, look what happened. That was Australia. This was my old neighborhood. It's just like when we had the fires recently in LA, in Pacific Palisades, the neighborhood next to mine, the neighborhood where my daughter went to school, the neighborhood where her friends lived. It's not distant for me. This is the place where I used to go. I lived close enough to Bondi Beach. I went walking there on my daily walks every afternoon, and it took me less than 20 minutes to get there. So this is a place I lived for years. And I worked in various communities, including different religious communities, including the Jewish community. So I immediately contacted my Jewish friends, make sure they were okay. This is not distant for me. I don't know about for you, but it's not distant for me. And when I see things like this, I know if it can happen there in a relatively peaceful society where they don't have the crime rates we have in the United States, goodness knows what can happen here. We all need to sit up and pay attention. And yes, I know it's uncomfortable, but I want you all to be brave because we need to deal with this situation. And let's discuss it, how you may be feeling and how we can move forward, you as an individual and all of us together. Now, when I mentioned collective trauma, you may be asking yourself, what does that mean? What it means is your sense of safety is disrupted. In Europe, I don't know if you've been to Europe or if you know any Europeans. As a military brat, I mean, I've moved around a lot. And once you get used to moving, you keep going. So even after I left home, I moved to France, I moved to England, moved to Australia. I went to high school, though, in Germany because my dad was transferred to Germany. And in fact, some of my friends from high school that were in Germany with me are watching the show. And Christmas markets are a huge thing there, and they're beautiful. They go all out decorating parts of town where you can go from stall to stall and find Christmas decorations, Christmas presents. They have music going. The food they sell has a particular smell, very Christmassy smell. I know in England, where they have the Christmas markets, they often have someone on the bagpipes playing Christmas carols. It's so beautiful. But France, where I went to college, Paris, where I lived, had to cancel their Christmas and New Year's celebrations because they're afraid of Islamic terrorism. Is this how we want to live? So in France, their community sense of safety is completely disrupted. Something that is a very cherished tradition has been canceled out of fear. And what else is collective trauma? Collective trauma is also this assumption that we're safe here. It's broken. Nobody going to Bondi Beach is iconic, and it's in a very exclusive part of town. Nobody going to that beach is going to expect to be shot by terrorists. That's just, it would never have crossed their minds. They were out there celebrating Hanukkah, the festival of lights. Everyone was welcome. Bondi Beach is absolutely stunning. If you get a chance to go to Australia and you get a chance to see Bondi Beach, you'll see what I mean. But of course, nobody's going to plan a trip there now. No one feels safe. It's a contract, a social contract. Feels like it's been broken. When we have our universities, our places of higher learning, and having gunmen come in and shoot people, saying Allah Akbar, and you have the police hiding that, disguising that, not wanting people to know who it was or what their motivation was, that is also a broken social contract. It's about people who weren't physically present, still feeling emotionally affected. I know I was. I was in tears. I was in tears. And did you see the little 10-year-old girl that was killed? A Holocaust survivor was killed. To survive the Holocaust and then be murdered at a Hanukkah festival on a beach where everybody had an expectation of being safe. It's unacceptable that we continue like this. Were you affected at all by this? By what happened at Brown University? What happened to the National Guards? Did it touch you emotionally at all? Did it make you angry? Are you starting to feel a little bit more wary or afraid? A lot of people who didn't expect it had a very emotional reaction to this. And of course, it's important to understand that feeling of emotional disruption intensifies when these events occur over the winter holidays, Hanukkah, Christmas. I mean, you just don't expect it then. You think to yourself, peace on earth, goodwill towards men, Christmas carols, eggnog, presents, watching It's a Wonderful Life over and over again on television. That's what you think of for Christmas, getting together with friends, the children being excited, having a Christmas tree in that that wonderful Christmas tree smell, you're not thinking about, do I have to be careful when I go to buy some little Christmas decorations for my tree? Do I have to be careful when I go to this market to get a unique and special present for a loved one, that someone's going to attack us because we're celebrating this holiday? And while the Jews in Australia have known for the last several years, with this current Labor government, they have allowed anti-Semitism to escalate without taking any real action to address it. So, reading papers and talking to people from the Jewish community, they have become very wary over the last several years, and some have even left Australia because of the anti-Semitism they're experiencing. And when you allow unfettered immigration from the Middle East, from Pakistan, from India, you are not doing much. Now, nobody's accusing the Indians of attacking the Jews. I'm not saying that. But when you allow people from very foreign cultures to overwhelm your society, people feel a little uncomfortable anyway. It doesn't feel like home anymore. And then when you have a government that is so passive regarding who they will actually take action against, they were really bullying during the COVID years. If you went out without a mask, I was in Melbourne at the time, and you had these black-clad police officers who'd ask you for your ID because you were only allowed out 1 hour a day. You had to wear a mask even outside, and you couldn't go more than 5 kilometers, which is a little over 3 miles from your house. And they had no hesitation about grabbing somebody, arresting someone, fining someone if they broke the rules, if they went to the beach by themselves during the COVID years when they said, oh, no one can go to the beach. But anti-Semitism happens, Jewish people being spat on, yelled at, attacked. They take very little action. They're sending a very strong signal. And a lot of Jewish people are not going to wait until it gets worse before they move. Some of those people have been there their families have been there since after the Second World War. And they feel like they have to leave. Now, realize when our brains perceive danger, whether it's real, it's something happening in our immediate environment, in our space, or symbolic, where we're watching it on the media, or it's somebody that we know. The amygdala, the emotional part of the brain, activates the primal brain, the reptilian brain, where the fear response is that really quick fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That part of the brain activates. It tells you have to do something. It tells you to be scared, to act, to keep yourself safe. And it causes an acute stress response. And believe me, this is not something you can choose to have. A lot of people, even watching this show, may be surprised by how strong their reaction has been over the last month, when every time you look at the media, whether you watch it on television or especially if you watch social media, because they have a wider coverage of issues than they do on television, every time you look up, there's another terrorist attack. Your primal brain does not, your amygdala, that's in here, the limbic system, and your primal brain back here, they don't ask your permission before they activate. They don't ask you, well, do you want to be scared now? They just look at what's happening, and your anxiety levels may be going up. So what can this do? It can cause you to start being hypervigilant when you go out. So before you would just relax and have a good time, now you're looking around, seeing if anybody is looking dodgy. Are they doing something strange? Is there something I need to be paying attention to? You may have trouble sleeping. I know for me, this last little while, me waking up at 3 a.m. is not normal. I the incident at Brown really bothered me, and things like that do disrupt my sleep. You may find yourself being irritable and just touchy because you don't feel safe. It's hard to be magnanimous and feel peace on earth, goodwill towards men when you don't feel safe. You may be emotionally numb. You may try to put cotton wool around your feelings because you don't want to feel that fear and that pain. You may have difficulty concentrating. And it could give you just a general sense of foreboding. This is all part of an acute stress response. And again, please pay attention to whether you have any of these symptoms, because your brain, the other parts of your brain, not the part that is language based, trouble, problem solving, that's listening and rational and logical, not that part, but the other parts of your brain that are also hearing me, that are also seeing these images of danger, they could activate without your permission, and you need to know how to handle that in case it does. Now, here's some good news. I should have trumpets here. I need some trumpets. I need to add some trumpets. Dun, 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 dun. Here's some good news. Even if you're feeling the acute stress response, it should settle down a little bit if we have no more attacks. Of course, if we keep having attacks like this, it's not going to help it. It's going to get more severe. But if we don't, the passage of time, you sticking to your routine, going back to your regular life, having some emotional support, having somebody in your life you can talk to about it without them saying, oh, you're just being negative or just dismissing how you're feeling. Somebody that's actually supportive, it can help you work through that so you get back to normal. Now, how you process these events matters. One of the things that first came to mind when this happened, and I was thinking about 9/11. Now, are any of you old enough to remember what happened when the Twin Towers came down, when New York was attacked? Now, my daughter was born in New York, and her father worked for American Airlines. He had two jobs. He worked for American Airlines, and he also worked for a program for children with Down syndrome that was not far, very close to the Twin Towers. Now, we were in California. I was checking her into school on the first day of school. They had the news on, and they showed the Twin Towers, and they showed an American Airlines plane flying into the Twin Towers. And my daughter, who's small, looked at me and said, is Daddy on that plane? I immediately tried to call him, and if any of you know anyone who was in New York at the time, you couldn't get through. So we didn't know until that evening whether he had been on any of the planes or if he had been hurt when the towers fell, because he was at the school and something happened to the school. We didn't know the extent of the damage, nothing. But it was interesting paying attention to a lot of the people around me in LA. A lot of people around me immediately tried to emotionally distance themselves from what was occurring. Even though it was New York, it was the United States that was attacked, they were like, well, that's New York, that's not us. They could not handle thinking that Los Angeles was at risk, and it was. They were able to stop what was going to occur in Los Angeles. We didn't find that out until later, but these people immediately distanced themselves. And you see a lot of that. I even had a friend of mine in Australia do that. Lives in another state, doesn't live in Sydney, never lived in Sydney. So basically didn't even get too upset about what happened. You may be thinking, well, I'm not too worried about it because the people have been attacked at both, at Brown, the people that are attacked in Sydney, they were Jewish and I'm not Jewish. It's a common thing to say, to make yourself feel safe by saying that's those other people that are in danger. That's those people, that's over there, that's out there, that's not where I live. It's a normal reaction, but let's talk a little bit about whether that really helps. In the short term, if it keeps you from panicking or extreme emotional distress, it can be helpful. Now, again, when the towers came down, we could not distance ourselves from what was happening because Raven was worried about, my daughter, Raven, was worried about her father and a place that we both lived, that we had friends and family, and it wasn't really over there. It was, oh my goodness, that's part of the places that we consider home. So I had to do what I could to calm her down. When I was like, I was very upset. I couldn't show it because I didn't want her to panic. So it is very common to try to distance yourself when something like that happens, especially if you don't think you can handle it. However, this is a big however, so listen up. It becomes dangerous if it transforms into dismissal. And oh, by the way, Roscoe's here. Hi, Roscoe. It said 8 to 18 when the towers came down. That was, if you didn't live through it, oh my goodness. I'd always, just to say, go back to it a minute, I'd always wondered what it was like living through World War II. You know, I used to see all the footage. I've always been fascinated with the Second World War and the European theater and how well the British were able to handle being attacked every night and bombed and everything else, that sense of cohesion that they had. For a short while, it was like that when the towers came down, especially for people who had any link at all to New York. New York violent crime rate plummeted because people felt a sense of connection to each other. It was really interesting. But distancing, here's where distancing becomes dangerous. And I want to say, I'm talking to you now, not just about this, the collective trauma during a mass violence event. A lot of what I'm talking to you about today is the same issue I have because my primary field of expertise is domestic violence prevention. And a lot of the things that are happening here with regard to this terrorism is the same opposition that I face when I try to get people to do something about domestic violence. Now, I have one of the only, if not the only, prevention program in the world, and I'm very proud of that. But a lot of people haven't even registered it's possible. They just emotionally distance themselves from it because it's too hard to think about it. It's like, I don't want to know. I just don't want to know. And people are doing this about the terrorism as well. When distancing becomes dismissal, you've got a problem. It can encourage you to turn away and to stop noticing. In domestic violence, we have a problem because so many people have tried to remove the stigma from being a victim survivor by publicizing, oh, this could happen to anybody. And the reaction of a lot of people has been, well, if it could happen to anyone, then I'm just going to cross my fingers and just close my eyes and just keep walking. And the truth of the matter is, you can actually see it coming. I can actually show you what it looks like if someone's trying to lure you and into an abusive relationship and condition you to accept a toxic situation. You don't have to be smart. I teach 13-year-olds. But it won't happen if you just close your eyes and cross the street without looking. And a lot of people who don't want to know how much of a threat certain groups of people are, they want to close their eyes to this. So when distancing encourages you to turn away, you stop noticing danger. You won't examine warning signs, even really glaring ones. You won't improve the safety conditions because you're too busy just saying it won't happen to me, it won't happen to me. Let me put on blinders, let me put my fingers in my ears. We cannot afford to do that anymore. It becomes increasingly dangerous. And this is the same thing I tell people when They're looking at their relationships, their personal relationships, and don't want to learn really simple ways to spot the danger. Everything I do is simple, effective, measurable. And some people still don't want to know. I don't get that. I don't want to walk into a dangerous situation. If you stop noticing, you don't support prevention or education. You don't act on what is relevant. We have to be more vigilant. We have to pay attention. We cannot afford wishful thinking. We are in a very dangerous world right now. And it does not help us to pretend it's only somewhere else or someone else who's at risk. We're all at risk. And I'm sorry if that bothers you to know, but it's true. Distancing soothes anxiety, but it gives you blind spots. So when I've dealt with people, it's interesting because before I wrote my book, But He Says He Loves Me, I had interviewed more than 2,500 victim survivors of abuse. And I never met a single one who recognized the warning signs that were evident even at the very beginning of their relationship. Not one. Once I pointed it out, they could see it. And in fact, when they were telling me about the early relationship, I could just write down all the warning signs. They were there, but nobody had ever told them. And so they didn't know. They didn't know how to weigh it. They didn't know how much risk they were in. If they'd known, they could have made very different decisions. But also, if you're distancing yourself because it's too inconvenient to know, even if you encounter warning signs, you're going to find a way to rationalize them away. You're going to tell yourself, it'll be okay. This is one of the biggest issues culturally with the Australians. They have a saying, she'll be all right, mate, where they have increasingly walked into a situation that is destroying their culture, it's destroying their economy, and most of them still keep voting for the people who are doing this because they think magically that everything's just going to work out for the best just because. We're grown-ups. We have to think differently than that. We have to think better than that. And by having those blind spots, by turning away, by not educating yourself, by not allowing other people to educate themselves, by not focusing on how do we not only address this, how do we prevent this, you enable the violence to persist. There is nobody that looked at the cultural norms over the last 2-3 years in Australia that is shocked by this massive terrorist attack. They are appalled, but they're not shocked because all the pieces were there. Again, when you allow people who talk about from the river to the sea, destroy the Jews, and they're allowed to get away with this. But if you say anything that implies that you're not pro-LGBT or you're not pro-Aboriginal, you have the police knocking at your door, you have people, they're trying to fine you or send you to jail. But no, if you're anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, that's fine. You can take over Harbor Bridge. And it's become, when you see a lot of people doing it, a lot of trendy leftists who just want to belong to a group will join any cause that's popular. They don't care what it is. So they're out there marching. They have no idea. They paid no attention to the appalling barbarism that occurred 2 years ago in October in Israel. That was filmed by the terrorists and put on social media. So it's not like you could say, oh, that's propaganda. They filmed it themselves. They publicized it themselves. Brutal rapes and murders, men, women, children, babies. And these people still put on the gear and out there walking, let's blame it all on the Israelis. How badly does your brain work in order for you to think that way? So it is not surprising that these two men from Pakistan knew that they could pretty much get away with what they did in order to be able to shoot 60 people with rifles. You are taking a bit of time. And we saw the one, he's a Middle Eastern Christian who disarmed one of the gunmen. The gunman ran away, grabbed another rifle, and continued shooting. And in fact, the police ended up shooting the guy who had disarmed him because he's Middle Eastern and they saw him with a rifle. They thought he was one of the gunmen and they shot him. But it took them forever. We saw the police cowering. We saw the police hiding. We saw the police putting their hands up. They did nothing to protect the public. But it's all part of that mindset of thinking you're special and safe just because. So what we need is clear-eyed awareness without panic. We have to do something differently or the violence is going to escalate. All of the indicators are there. All of the warning signs are there. And the action has to be based on sound strategy and evidence, not on emotion. So even if those of us who are emotional about the situation, we cannot make these decisions while we're feeling emotional. We have to take some deep breaths. We have to stand back. We have to let ration and justice and other positive things guide our steps. Otherwise, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. And we don't want to counter terrorism with totalitarianism. That is the fear. How do you get rid of this? Well, I know how to get rid of it. I'm a social psychologist. Of course, I know how to get rid of it. But do we have the will to do what is necessary? A lot of people are still trying to placate those who despise us and want us dead. So I thought about this. I want you all to think about what has been happening as though it is an abusive relationship. So if you're not in an abusive relationship, you probably have a little bit more distance and clarity, so you can think of it that way. So think of it like an abusive relationship with a really violent partner. As we go through and we figure out what to do, think of it that way. If we have these nice, feel good, hold hands, kumbaya gestures, is it going to work? Is it going to help? Will we look just or will we look weak to the person who's inclined towards violence? Because we can't, when you're making strategy like this, it's foolish to just base everything on how you perceive the world. You have to get into the mindset of the others that you're dealing with and ask yourself and determine, if we do A, how will that be interpreted? If we do B, how will that be interpreted? We have to think about it. Now, another thing to do, because I'm worried about all of us as we go through this. This is Christmas season, and I'm not feeling Christmassy yet, and Christmas is next week. I was actually going to do some Christmassy episodes. I'll try to do one next week. Hopefully things will get a little bit better by next week. So one of the things, and believe me, I am talking to myself here too. People, please understand that I'm not just talking to you. I'm going to have to start creating boundaries around my media exposure. Now, if you go on sources like X, one of the benefits of X, which is formerly known as Twitter, is that it gives you more frank assessment of the events in the world than you find in most news sources. Most news sources are very slanted and they interpret the events for you. On X, people will often record what's going on, put it up there, and allow you to interpret it yourself. So you get a lot more information, lot more accurate information off X than I do from anywhere else. However, when you are trying to take care of your mental health, you have to be careful about immersing yourself in such dark events on a regular basis. There's nothing I can really do to protect Australia because Australia is not willing to protect itself. And it makes me want to cry. If you've been there, it's a wonderful country. But there's nothing I can do about it. So ruining my mental health, worrying about it is not going to help anybody. So we have to limit our time on the media. We have to look up YouTube videos of kittens and puppies and other positive things. Stop looking only at the grim news. And also try to avoid the graphic content or the speculative content, especially there are some people who rush in to put their slant on events before they have any of the facts. You have to be really careful about that. You need to choose reliable sources, and you have to be careful about exposing yourself to too much grim imagery. Remember what I said about there are being parts of your brain that are not in your control. So if you keep exposing graphic imagery to your amygdala, to your limbic system, to your primal brain, it's going to get really scared. And that anxiety response is going to go into a chronic anxiety response. And you're not going to be able to stop it. So you have to be careful and step away if and when the stress symptoms escalate. If you start finding it hard to sleep, if you start having nightmares, then you know that it's time to step away from all the graphic content. You have to be more careful about what you expose yourself to. Now, I'm not saying go into la la land and be unaware, but just be more careful, limit your time. What happens if your kids come to you and say, what in the world is happening? How do you handle that? Well, answer honestly and simply and calmly. If you panic, they're going to panic. And I talking to you about how I handled 9/11 with my daughter, who was terrified that her father was actually on the plane that was flying into the Twin Towers. I learned she got anxious very easily. She still does. Don't tell her I said that. And if she's watching, you have to forgive your mom. But I always had to be very calm when I explained things to her because she was looking to me to see whether she should be afraid. So I was concerned, and I said, okay, I know they had to cut off the phone because the phone system would be overwhelmed. Let's just wait to see, and let's wait to find out. This isn't a day that your father is usually flying. He usually doesn't fly during the week. He's usually at the school. So let's wait and see what happens. Maintain your routines. Children thrive when they have routines. So don't disrupt the routines. Keep to the routines. And allow questions without oversharing. So don't give them all the graphic details. Just give them a basic overview depending on their age and personality. Give them enough information that they understand generally what's going on, but not enough. You don't want to give them nightmares. You don't want to make them afraid to live their lives. So you have to be careful. Now, if the person you're supporting is another adult, if they're afraid, if they're upset, let them talk to you about it. This is such a big gift. You're talking about Christmas or even Hanukkah gifts. This is a gift. Let somebody share with you without you responding. Let them just talk. Don't judge them. Don't limit them. Don't tell them you're overreacting. Don't poo-poo it. Don't say calm down. Let them talk. Let them get it out. Give them a hug. Don't try to minimize the fear they're feeling. That will happen naturally once they get it out of their system. Just listen. And if they get really emotional, don't go into a debate with them. just nod your head, be there, pat their hand, give a hug, but don't, because that will make the situation extend and will escalate the situation. That's the last thing you want to do. And please note, if you belong to a community that was directly targeted, your fear is not an overreaction, it's contextually rational. So if you are Jewish and you feel like right now Jews are under attack, anti-Semitism is escalating throughout the Western world, there is a lot of evidence to support that view. So it is not an exaggeration. It is not an overreaction. The question that should be in your mind, what are we all going to do about it? And again, for us Christians, remember the Jews are the canaries in the coal mine. If they will do these things against Jewish people, they don't think any more of us. The people doing this don't think any more of us than they do the Jews. They pick on the Jews because they're a smaller group. And because often they've seen from past history that Christians may try to distance themselves from the risk and the danger by saying, oh, well, that's them. That's not us. That's not us. It is us. So if you're having a very strong reaction and saying action needs to be taken, you're absolutely right. And that's not something we need to discuss. Because mass violence is done as a way to fracture our sense of safety. So it's done to harm us. It's to make us feel unsafe, to acknowledge that we are not in control of our own societies. That's why it's done. And it works. And it works. And if you feel very emotional right now, even if you're not Jewish, even if you've never been to Australia, even if you don't know where Brown University is on a map, if you're feeling emotional because something about all of this really touched you, that's valid. It's not irrational. It's not a sign of weakness. It means that your mind is understanding there's an active threat in our environment that is not being addressed yet. And we need to start addressing it. There are too many moves being made politically, even within the United States, that are making the bad guys feel safe and the good people feel at risk. And we need to reverse that. So whatever decisions have been made in the past, even if the past was yesterday, the people in power need to sit up and take notice because they're making some bad decisions. And as I've mentioned, if you've watched this show before, I've told you as a social psychologist, one of the things we also learn is flow out. So if you drop that stone in the pond, what are the circles going to be? And if you look towards the future, what will it lead to? So when I've been looking at some of the political decisions being made in Washington, I am cringing because it's some of these decisions that have made the bad guys feel like they can attack us and get away with it. And we need them to be afraid of us, quite simply. We need them to be afraid of us. And placating people because they say the right things in public and put funding towards something or take our politicians on a trip. No. Even if they took you on a wonderful trip, your obligation is to a different group of people. And it's over here. And you need to look at that. Stop, look at that and say, okay, what do I do to not just make my people feel safe, but increase the genuine safety of the people in this country? And the Australians need to do that, but they don't have any leadership that will do it. So they're in trouble right now. They're in deep trouble because the people they just reelected to lead them are the ones that are placing them squarely in danger, that are letting their economy tank, that are selling out important assets to foreign powers that are giving away huge tracts of lands to indigenous people who will then on sell it to these foreign powers. They are just making every mistake you could make with a valuable country. So you don't necessarily have to have foreign soldiers march through your streets. You don't have to have when the Germans march through Paris. They can come in plain clothes and take over, welcomed by a lot of people who have never met a violent person that they haven't rationalized for. They just seem hell-bent on destroying our society and telling themselves it makes them virtuous to do so. But we have to try to understand. Now, as I said, limit to whom you listen to and speak. Make sure that they know what they're talking about. It's important you understand what's causing the danger, what's really going on. And please don't try to do everything yourself. Find other people of like mind and support each other. We prevent future events by looking calmly and rationally at the risks and taking firm action without apology. Again, if this is tough for you, if you're afraid, oh, but people are going to call me a bigot, think of this like an abusive relationship. Would you, if you saw someone who was constantly being brutalized, would you tell her that she needs to stay in that marriage? They just need to be nicer to each other. Or would you tell her, get out, it's never getting better, you're at serious risk? What would you say? What would you suggest? That's how you need to think about this. It is like we are in an abusive relationship with a proportion of our population. No rose-colored glasses, people. No rose-colored glasses. No more willful blindness. Don't look away from things that are inconvenient to recognize. We have to examine the risks and we have to reduce them. Now, Roscoe made another comment. Now, wherever you are, if you're ever watching this live, all you have to do is sign in and you can send comments and questions as well. Roscoe made a comment that if Australia cared about protecting itself, people would be in jail for COVID overreach. Oh, absolutely. But people aren't in jail for COVID overreach in the United States either, or in Canada, or in the UK. Nobody has gone to jail yet for what they've done. And it was a crime against humanity. Now, does anybody else have a question or a comment? And remember, you don't have to leave them now. If something comes to you later, go to anywhere where you find the recording of this episode and just drop the question or comment underneath, because I look at them and I read them and we can talk about it. But I want everybody to be not just safe, I want you to be psychologically healthy as we deal with these terrible situations coming from out of the blue at a time when we're all supposed to be joining hands and celebrating. Now, if you would like to contact me about my work and what I do, my company is called Ethical Strategic Solutions, and you can find me at ethicalstrategic.com. Really easy, really fast. Next week, I'm going to start giving you my information for my new agent who will handle the situations for me. But please don't wait until the end of the year. Act now so I can actually book you in. Believe me, we do things differently. We actually have measurable results because I put neurology, social psychology, neurolinguistic programming into the education and training because I want to make sure it's memorable and I want to make sure it lasts. And next year, we're having online classes. So contact me with any topic that you would like to learn. We're going to be doing it online, and whatever your budget is, you'll be able to afford it. We'll have 2 levels. We'll have one level where anybody can come, just super cheap, everybody can come. And we'll have smaller classes that'll be a little bit more, but every single person in that class will get online one-on-one interaction with me so that we can tailor whatever the topic is to suit your life and your circumstances. So thank you so much for joining me here on Heart and Mind. I hope you're okay. My prayers and best wishes go out to all of you. And we're going to talk next week. Next week is Christmas week. So we're going to try to do something more positive. But I hope it's positive for you to figure out you're not crazy, how to handle this disruption so that you can heal and work through it and spend time with your loved ones. So I will see you again next Tuesday. Remember, no more boring Tuesdays. If you want to contact me, easiest way, go on X to @Dr. Dina 1 and send me a message. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you.